Well, how's everyone doing out there? Nice to be with you this lovely May day. It's quite sunny and beautiful here in South Florida at Hippocrates Health Institute. And we're launching today what is going to be one of the most important endeavors Hippocrates has been involved with in our 60-year history. We're going to pioneer on this platform. As many of you know out there, the gaming platform actually was a precursor to lots of the most important avenues on the internet now. All social media started here. So that's why we chose this venue to basically search out the world and gather together thinking people who understand that we have been corrupted at the core, and the institutions that were meant to protect us are actually the institutions to be frightened of today. So today we're going to have a subject that many of you may be interested in, and I hope so. I'll try to keep it as entertaining as I can. And the subject is, what is healthcare? Well, I can tell you that it's almost an oxymoron to call what we think in most of the world as healthcare. It's crisis management. And when you look at where that comes from, it's quite simple. A century ago, everything was natural healthcare. And for all time before that, from the beginning of civilization, man was using foods and love and plants for healing. What happened is that a new institution was emerging that systematically tried to take control of medicine globally. That was a very difficult thing for them to do, but the patent laws around the globe allowed it to happen. So they took plants, which were inherently used and understood very, very well by the chemist of the day, to be very helpful in a wide array of different diseases, and they patented them. They literally went into laboratories and played with them just a little bit and got a patent on them. That was the beginning of what we today call the pharmaceutical industry. Now, they had a whole lot of problems in the beginning because people were used to going to natural doctors, and most people basically took care of the minor problems in their own home. It was most often the mother, the grandmother, and the women in the household that were the ones who understood from their parents, their forebears, exactly what to do when a common cold came or when people were ready to have a baby. And it wasn't very comfortable for them to go to these new professionals that we today call allopathic doctors. This emerging field recognized that they had to make taboo, or old-fashioned, or old school as we call today, all the traditional medicine from the past. So they started to say that was folk medicine, the type of medicine that basically we didn't want to do anymore. We're modern people, so we have to do modern things. And the white coats came on, and the money came into the game, and before you know it, they realized that they had to control the medical education. And so allopathic doctors went into school, and what happened with them is, without knowing, they went in with the right intent. They were slowly but surely conditioned to be prescription writers. And one half of medical education at allopathic medical schools worldwide is funded by the pharmaceutical industry. So it ought not to be surprising to any of us that the allopathic doctor is relegated in greatness, or great part, to everything is resolved with a pill. Again, we moved forward, and those pills basically in the first generation of being patented were not so far from the natural medicines of the past. But by the second generation and third generation came an awful lot of arrogance in the field of allopathic medicine, where they actually superseded nature. And they thought that, my God, we actually are so intelligent that we can do better than nature. And this is where we got into problems. And as we sit here today at the beginning of the 21st century, statistically, 7 out of 10 pharmaceutical medicines on the market today, one of the potential side effects is fatality. Now, can you imagine a field that has emerged that their product has a potential to harm and to maim people? Now, we're not saying that's all bad. As a matter of fact, allopathic medicine has done an awful lot of good. The diagnostic work has been brilliant, barring the side effects that many of the radioactivity diagnostic technologies have. We also know that surgery has saved lives of people. I actually believe the overwhelming majority of physicians and researchers in the field of medicine are doing it for the right reason, for the right cause. But when we have, at the end of the game, an idea that we are better than or smarter than the inherent biological forces that govern all life on this planet, including your life, we're going to end up in a trouble. And that's where we sit today. Now, I'm a believer in roundtables. I think that we all have our place in the field of health, legitimate health care. I think lifestyle should be the foremost issue discussed and applied in everyone's existence. If we could teach from a very young age, first in the family, and then through our educational systems, how to take care of oneself, psychologically, biologically, food as well as exercise, there'd be far less disorder today. The CDC, Center for Disease Control here in the United States, has actually said on several occasions that 80% of all cancers are lifestyle created, that 95% of all cardiovascular disease is lifestyle related, that 100% of type 2 diabetes is lifestyle related. Now, besides the fact that this is a human problem and human suffering is involved, I'm also very concerned, as anyone who's thinking should be, about the economic impact this has on economies in your country and globally. That it's not sustainable to use a pill-related so-called healthcare system that at the end, in most cases, doesn't have a resolve, doesn't have a resolution. So we constantly are feeding the monster, as we say, and not getting to the cause of the problem. This is what we have been doing here at Hippocrates for now 60 years. For 60 years, our interest is lifestyle motivation and modification. Now, if we can motivate people to change their lifestyle through self-respect, and we then can educate them on how to continue it after they leave Hippocrates Health Institute, we've achieved our objective. Our founder, Anne Wigmore, understood this very well when she opened the doors in 1956 in Boston, where we resided for 30 years. It was almost 30 years ago we moved the Institute and opened it here in West Palm Beach, Florida. And ever since the first day, with the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who have come through Hippocrates, our whole thrust is to teach you to take responsibility for your life, to take charge of your life, to have the tools that are necessitated to keep yourself well, young, vital, and functional. And if we could put that as the centerpiece of the progressive health care movement, I think we could remedy the overwhelming majority of disorders that we have today. It is almost insanity, as far as I'm concerned, to wait until somebody is catastrophically ill, use crises management that in many, many, many cases, the majority of cases, really ultimately doesn't work, and the cost of that is unsustainable. Educate the child, educate the family. Generationally, it now becomes a natural process to live correctly. And I see this happening. In spite of the healthcare system today, the general public has turned radically in the direction of healthy lifestyles. There is a tremendous difference over the last decade, and I don't see this stopping. The economists of the world tell us the next centerpiece for the economy is going to be the self-care movement. Now, why this has happened is that healthcare brought it upon themselves. When you have a system that doesn't give a resolve and doesn't give an answer, and basically says to you that everything is relegated to a pill, people start to lose trust. Now, there are times when we need pills. There are times when we need surgery. There are times when we need help. We're not precluding that from the picture, because round table means lifestyle may be the centerpiece, but in times of emergency or crises, we love to employ proper, legitimate allopathic medicine. So when we get to the crises management, and as the numbers have just been given to you, that the three major diseases, heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, are either from 80 to 90% correctable or preventable. Can you imagine the amount of suffering that we can eliminate, the amount of money that will be saved if people literally take responsibility for their life? And let's go one step further. Can you imagine if we basically have the next generation and the generation after that recognize that we are in total charge of our existence? That it's not time to blame other people for our concerns and say ridiculous things like it's always genetic. Well, it's not genetic. As the Europeans know, it's epigenetic. Epigenetic means you bring it upon yourself. You create it from your environment. Matter of fact, yesterday I was reading an incredibly interesting book on the history of cancer therapy and the emperor of all disease, a beautifully well-written book by a medical doctor who talks about his father's generation versus the current generation, and how there was a lot of compassion and lifestyle was discussed not long ago. And today it's almost become robotic, the way that we treat people. But we see this in every other area too. We have emerging diseases that are frightening. If you look at autism, the statistics are shocking, stunning. When we now know that statistically it appears by 2025 that 50% of the children born in the developed world will have some level of autism. Now that's shocking when you think of this. And this is not only Hippocrates Health Institute that knows how to count and to follow statistical trends, but this is MIT speaking about this. The great institutions in Europe speaking about this. It's stunning when you think that over half the population in the developed world will have some level of cancer, when 100 years ago it was a vague disease that hardly ever appeared. We should recognize that that has something to do with the way we're living today. And so if we can get at that table and say, what are you best at? What are you best at? Are you a person who's best at surgery? Are you a person who's best at psychology to change the patterns of poor lifestyle? Are you the best at medicine or herbal medicine or homeopathic medicine? And I think it's time that we put the person in the center of the conversation again. The egos and all of the economics that have been governing even natural health care over the last several decades need to be abolished, need to be washed out of the picture. And we need to go patient-oriented again. Here we call the people who come to us guests. They are our guest, and we're to facilitate them in the best way we possibly can to support them. Our motto for 60 years has been help people help themselves. Not cure people, not force people to do something they don't want, but help people to help themselves. That's what we have to get back to again. And in the time when a person needs a helping hand, that's when we need to interview with more crises management discussion. Now, I've learned in the 45 years that I've done this work that it takes a team. It really does take a team. It takes a village. Every individual who comes here and participates in our life transformation program literally has a different way to open their door. For some of the people, it may be the mere fact that we've changed their diet to a clean, organic, pure, plant-based, raw diet. That's very helpful for all of us. But that may be the real essence of why that person was sick or unhappy. Because it's not only physiological disease we're speaking about, but it's psychological disease. For another person, it may be when they go over and get body work, and they've had pain in their body that may have been propelled by an emotional trauma that they haven't resolved. And time again, over the decades, people have said to me, that was the transformational period. Everyone who comes here to Hippocrates gets psychotherapy. It's part of the program. That always is very central and a cornerstone of changing a person's life. And many times it was a revelation of what they were holding in, possibly for decades, when resolved, that let them take the weight off their back and then allow themselves to heal themselves. We have to understand that we're multifaceted individuals, that the human species is an interesting species. Number one, we're the most bizarre species that's ever existed on this planet, that we seemingly have a full-time job to destroy the earth that we've been given as a gift and kill ourselves. We're almost suicidal. At the other end, we're brilliant. We have a capacity to go beyond human imagination and to do extraordinary things. And we've seen that time and time again. So who are we? Do we choose to be the destroyer or the healer? And all healing begins with self-healing. All love of other people begins with self-love. And we've got to become the individual again. It's time to allow the individual to be who they wish to be, and to support the individual in their endeavors, rather than try to mold an individual and make them unhappy. It's better to support an individual in what makes them happy. Happy people are productive and healthy. So when people come here over the years, I've often asked, why are you here? And of course, many people come here because they're in the conquest of a big disease. And half the people that come here now, thank God, come through Hippocrates Life Transformation Program because they want to prevent disease or premature aging. But whatever their answer is to me, I always challenge it and say, really why you're here is because you want to be happy. Ultimately, that's why we all want to make changes. If you're happy being unhappy, that's what makes you sick. So you've got to come to a point of realizing our ultimate goal is to be happy and to be loved and to love. We want to love, we want to be loved, and we want to be happy. And the disease or the disorder gets in the way of being happy. So never ask for the small thing. Ask for what you really want. What you really want is that love and happiness. What you really want is the security and the depth of your heart. What you really need is to know that everything's okay. We've got to get rid of the fear factor. We've got to take away the obstacles of poor diet that drains your brain, your heart, your body. We've got to get rid of the obstacles of stagnation, where we're sitting and watching television and on our laptop computers for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and get up and move and use the body. We've got to create community, healthy relationships, and that's with your peer groups as well as in your personal relationships. with your wife, your husband, your children. We've got to get back to normality again. We all forget, because we're so caught up in our modern lives, that it was only a century ago that we had a very, very, very quiet existence. That there was no television, there was no radio, there was no computers, there were no cell phones. And with that, you were independent at that point. And not only were you a person that had one way to communicate, and that was verbally, and communicate with people that you were in contact with. It was a much simpler life. And I'm not suggesting today, because I'm sitting here on a computer speaking to you on a worldwide internet, that this is a bad thing. But let's not throw away our tradition, our history, our background. We need quiet time. We need community. We need family. We need work that we love, that you literally are passionate about. If you're doing work you do not love, you will become sick, psychologically and physically. Here in the United States and Canada, last year, the latest poll came out and showed that 80% of people seriously disliked what they did for work. That means where they're spending most of their time, a minimum of 40, maybe 50, 60 hours a week, they're not happy to be there. Why? Find what you love. Find your values. Find your virtues and employ them. Don't always put the wrong thing first. It's not how much you make, it's how much you do. It's how much you love. It's how much you contribute. These are the things that make people well. And never ask for the small thing. What you're really trying to do is become happy. And if you really, really are absolutely committed to that, you will not allow yourself to become physically and psychologically sick. I have never seen anything that's not correctable. I've had the great privilege in my life to work with very, very, very sick people. And our medical team, sometimes we shake our head. The great institutions of the world have told these people that they have fatal diseases. And we've seen in hundreds and thousands of cases when people commit themselves to happiness and they use the tools, the simple and understandable and effective tools of diet and movement and psychology, they're able often to reverse their disease. Now, you would say this is magic or by chance it happens. This is biology in action. And it's a biology you don't hear about because we created a dependency on others to make us well, because we've taken our hands off the wheel and somehow we're stunned when we become sick. Well, if you're driving down a highway at a very high speed and you take your hands off the wheel, would you be shocked if you have a crash? Why would it be any different in your life? So put your hands back on the wheel. Take responsibility. Don't blame others and don't say it's genetic. What you have to do is get together. And the only way that you'll ever get together is have self-respect. And self-respect is at the core of everything I'm discussing with you today. If you lack self-respect, you actually have no direction in your life. Self-respect gives you the strength, the wisdom, and the wherewithal, the ability to do whatever it is you desire to do. People throughout history that have done remarkable things were always told that they shouldn't do it. Why waste your time? It's impossible. Everyone who's ever been as sick as you dies. Give up. Well, I'm not one that believes in giving up. I'm one that believes that life is a gift. And if you understand that and truly, truly live by those rules, then you'll do anything to keep that gift intact. If you have a passion and a contributing aspect of who you are, then you have a reason to be here. If you're lost and confused with your hands off the wheel, maybe psychologically in the back of your mind, you're thinking it's not a bad thing that you die. Well, find ways to want to live And guess what? Nature will help you in this process. No exception, ever. So we're lucky that we can spend time like this together in this age, but I want you not only to sit in front of computers and listen to me speak about my ideas that I've developed since I was a young man, but I want you to develop your own ideas. I want you to become independent thinkers. I want you to challenge what you feel and you hear, to develop a core sense of who you are. I want you to understand that life is 100% up to you, that nobody can live your life for you, nobody can heal you, no magic involved in this process at all, that it's 100% up to you. What we can do is we can have assistance in our process of self-realization and self-healing. But the fact is, at the end of the day, you're the one sitting there in that skin 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, decade after decade. That there's no way out of this, people. So since there's no way out of it, find a way into it, and find a way into it that you really are comfortable with. I know that many of you may know this. When I was a young man, why I changed, I was provoked to do so because I was in a very huge body. I was an obese fella, an seriously overweight fella, well before most people became fat. And being a man, I got away with it because they always would use the term big rather than fat with me. And so I took that as a badge of honor rather than a badge of shame. And why I did that, looking back, it's sort of, I didn't have any justification, because I had a pretty good life, let me tell you that. I had parents that loved me. I always did what I loved. I had a good education. I came up in a nice family. But somehow deep inside, I didn't live with my values, my virtues. And so what happens to us that are self-destructive, I don't care if you're emaciated and creating anorexia, or you become an alcoholic, or you become a drug addict, or you overeat as I did, these are all addictive patterns that are representative of self-loathing. And when you look at why many of you have difficulties in conforming and taking responsibility for your life, is because you're not looking at the core issue, and that's what we're currently discussing. The core issue is self-worth. Now, if you don't think you're worthy of the good things in life and the pure things in life, it's virtually an impossibility for you to adapt a lifestyle of integrity. So you've got to get to that core. It's painful. It's very painful to look at that and say, what is it inside of me that's so broken, that's so sad, that's so unhappy, that literally I'm willing to eat to a point where I become sick. I'm willing to have a body that I'm uncomfortable in, be it too skinny or be it too big. That I constantly find myself in negative patterns rather than positive patterns and positive relationships. I sit here in my office month after month, year after year, and I often hear people say to me, every relationship I have ends up in a disaster. And the overwhelming majority of time, I ask the person if they participated in that, and they say, no, it's bad luck. There's no such thing as bad luck. You draw to you who you are. You draw to you what you are. And so understand that if you feel low about yourself and out of control and incapable and non-contributory, you're going to attract that to you. And so it's not that you have bad luck and that one negative thing happens after another. It's that you're in the melees, the mindset of negativity. You've got to picture it like being below the water and you're dying. You can't breathe, you're below the water. Somehow, if you have enough self-respect, you're going to drag yourself out of that water and pop up and get some air. That's what you've got to do. Where is the air in your life? And then become comfortable breathing and relaxing and feel confidence raised from that. And that level of confidence is just quite remarkable. When you start to feel that you have the capacity to govern your existence becomes a joy rather than a burden. When you start to recognize that there's no chance in life, that you're in the driver's seat, then you start to drive in clear, concise, productive directions. When we're lacking that understanding, and we don't have the energy and the wherewithal and the self-respect to raise above the water, we drown, we die. And this is totally unnecessary. But sadly, you have to listen to me speak about this. It's not taught in our educational system. It's not taught, sadly, by your parents, who unfortunately are struggling with the same issues that you struggle with at this moment. It's not taught anywhere. Even our spiritual community, religious community, most often ignores this. They speak to you about joining a club rather than finding yourself. The number one club you've got to join is you. Now, I know I didn't want to join my own club. It wasn't a very nice club. It's in disorder. But the fact of the matter is, tidy it up. Get the clubhouse straightened out. Bring good club members in. You want to hang out with those club members. You know, when you serve food, make sure the food is healing and strength-giving and alive, filled with energy, rather than the death and dying food that I dined on for the first part of my life. And it's amazing that when you have that chorus of positivity that you employ, how life just naturally and unfolds and inherently becomes a joy. And every day when you wake up, I promise you, you'll jump out of bed and look forward to what's going on. The next subject I want to speak about to all of you is how, it could be pretty depressing if you look at the news today or read the newspaper and how horrible everything is out there. And I mean, right now we're in the middle of the grips of a political season here in my country, in the United States. And what you have to understand is at the end of the day, the human condition is only one fractional aspect of the global and environment and biological condition. That I often hear people say to me, humans are going to blow up the planet. No, we aren't. We may blow ourselves off the planet, but we're not going to blow up the planet. We may all be gone, but the fact of the matter is life is going to keep moving as it has for endless time before and after. So we have a choice, and I think the choice is, how do we fit into everything? I know in my life, it's really simple things. I have 4 children, and when we would go into a bathroom together, I wouldn't take and give each of them the towel paper and hand individual towel paper. I knew we had just washed our hands, so I handed it to 3 of them. I dried my hands with it. The next one, this is respect. When I'm using at a hotel, and I travel constantly, I'm at hotels, towels, I take the smallest towel. I'm not 500 pounds. I take the smallest towel, and I use 1 towel. And the rare time that I run into the housekeeper at the hotel, they've said to me, "It's so nice to clean your room. We don't have much to do." And I said, "Well, why should you?" So little things like this actually give you value in your life. And it's not because you're doing this because you want to be a good person. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. You've got to find the things that really are the right things to do. And when you start doing one right thing after another right thing, your life rights itself. It becomes perfectly fine. The other thing I understand is that when I was teaching my children as they grew up, unlike my parents who loved me and supported me, what they should do, I always told them they should do what turns them on. Now, sadly, we have a world that is unfortunately governed by economics today. In such a dramatic and dynamic fashion that most people are told that you have to find a way to make money. And if the young child who's being taught that has a dream to do something that may not make money or may not make as much money, they're often discouraged from doing that. So you're set up as a child to suffer. Basically say, it's more important to suffer and have money than to be happy and do what you love. Now, that sounds sort of interesting now, but think about how profound that would be on having a good life, a happy life, or not. When we go back to the statistic I quoted about 5 minutes ago, where 80% of people here in North America hate what they do for work, no wonder, because somebody told you that money was more important than joy, happiness, and fulfillment. Why you're here, why I'm here, why every human being is on the planet Earth is to be fulfilled. And nobody can fulfill your life other than you. That's the secret nobody tells you about. Now, if you're not fulfilled, of course it's very easy to have open, gaping holes within your existence. And what we tend to do is we fill those gaping, open, sad holes inside of us with disorder. It may be food, it may be hatred, it may be disharmony of some type. And when you start to fill up those open holes, those gaping holes with impurities, then you become toxic on a spiritual, an emotional, a biological level. So what we must do is learn to stand on our head virtually, pour all of this stuff out, and then start to develop significance and self-worth by filling those holes up with love. Imagine pouring love into yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not tolerating or accepting anything other than joy and love. Now, that sounds a little utopic to a lot of you out there, a little new age for some of you. But the reality is you can do this. I've seen it time and time again. Think about the people who have really changed humanity's direction. Every one of those people did exactly what I've just told you. Now, of course, most of you would think they're exceptional people, they're more evolved than me. This is all nonsense. There is no higher person or lower person, more conscious person or less conscious person. It's all about our choice. Do we choose to use consciousness? Do we choose to do what turns us on? Do we choose to have joy in our life or not? Most people in our materially based culture and society think that their value comes from resistance and strength against what's right. You become strong fighting the odds. The truth of the matter is, you don't have to fight anything. Just let go and become comfortable with who you are. The strength comes from the joy of living. So every one of the times that humanity moved forward through the Martin Kings and the Mandelas and the wonderful people like Mother Teresa, it's because these people were getting joy out of the fulfillment of contribution. When I'm with people who are dying, and often I have been because I've worked with very sick people my whole adult life, there's no exaggeration or embellishment at those tender moments. And what I hear time and time again, almost across the board, is I wish my priorities were different. I wish I had spent more time telling people that were close to me I love them. I wish I had spent more time not chasing economic and material realms, but realms of communication and support. Let's not wait until we're sick to have that happen. It's ironic and insane, to be honest with you. Start to live your life in such a pure and a whole and a happy way that we together can all change the destiny and course for the human race. Don't worry, things are not so bad. Things are a lot better than the so-called contorted leaders would like you to believe. Things are not going to collapse because the materialism is going to collapse. If you have love, it abolishes all negativity. We've seen it time and time again. I see it here. When people heal themselves, it's through love that they heal themselves. Yes, there's tools that love carries along with it, but it's love that's a healer. And that's not generated from someone else patting you on the back and admiring you. It's from you understanding you have that core strength within every cell of your body. Trillions and trillions of cells. Every cell has that inherent, extraordinary ability to change at the split second. You change your attitude. You change the way you think. We used to think that genetics were something that molded itself evolutionarily over millennia. Now we realize that you can change genes in 1 second. And so we also know, for instance, with a disease like cancer, that there's switches that turn cancer on and off. This is clear. The science is in. But the fact of the matter is, if you switch it on, psychologically and lifestyle-wise, you can switch it off again. And when we understand that the power of the mind has a capacity to change the biology of the body, then why are we all excited and upset? Can you imagine a unified consciousness where the majority of people on earth think everything's okay and that we should do the right thing? And now it becomes the norm to do the right thing and not to destroy the very earth that we're on? Well, I don't think that this is a utopic, unrealistic dream. I see it coming to fruition in the next few years. I see every single person on the earth trying to find that tender, secure place that we entered this planet with. And it's going to happen. And you don't need a mass majority of 50, 60 people. The statisticians, thank goodness, have taught us that it only requires 18%. We've been looking at this very closely here at Hippocrates over the last 25 to 30 years. And we're pretty clear now, conservatively, we're at about 12% globally. So 12%, and we need about another 6% for what we call the level of justice to move in the right direction. When 18% of the population stands up and says, no more nonsense, no more poison in our food, no more environmental degradation, no more hatred, separation, segregation, all of the isms that we have out there, it's going to change. Now, do you want to join that army of love, or do you want to sit around and whine and complain about what's going on? If you don't trust and believe in the institutions that exist today, why are you so worried about the institutions that exist today? Create your own institution, the institution of contribution, the institution of contribution, the army of love. This is realistic. I think rehashing the negativity that has been established by people who are lost and confused themselves, but sadly are leaders, isn't what is going to be productive. What's going to be productive is to become a self-leader. And as we've seen with Gandhi as an example, this humble, small man, through self-understanding, self-motivation, self-realization, and yes, he used diet, and yes, he used body, and yes, he used all of these things, actually was able to eradicate without any violence the English Empire. What can you do when you have values? What can you do when you know who you are? What can you do when you're happy? When you're happy, man, don't you have a lot more energy than when you're sad? Don't you have a lot more ability than when you're sad? And this is really what we've been teaching here at Hippocrates Health Institute since 1956. So when people come here, it's about helping you become happy again. Because we want to produce happy people so that we're part of the puzzle of changing the course and the future for our species. I don't think it's the end of anything. I think it's the beginning of a new era. I don't think that we have to tolerate nonsense. As an example, let's take one issue, genetically modified foods. As we sit here, one of our guests is the world's leading authority on genetically modified foods. And he and I had a long conversation yesterday. And even though governments are in bed with the companies that want to manipulate your food and lie to you, by the way, that there's science that says that that's not going to harm you, and there's overwhelming science, even from the companies that make this, it does harm you. And they want not to have you know that food is genetically modified because they are fighting and spending millions and millions of dollars on preventing us from having it labeled on the food. They're going to lose. And why they're going to lose is because the public sentiment that the power of consciousness is saying no. So one major multinational food company after another major multinational food company is now saying they will not sell or disseminate genetically modified food. The power of the people, that was something my generation in the 60s spoke about. But it wasn't just a slogan, it was real. It was real. The power of consciousness. Are you going to join us? We're at 12%. We need another 6%. Are you going to be an example? How you draw people to truth is by example. You don't draw people to truth through philosophy, theology, writing books, and doing lectures. You may incite people, get people excited, but if you're not an example, people are going to say, she or he is part of the fraud. Don't be part of the fraud. Be part of the joy. It's a lot nicer for you and everyone else around you, I can tell you. The next subject I'd like to speak to you about is the importance in your life to take step by step to move in this direction. Now, some of you listening out there today have been diagnosed with a serious disease. You don't have any time to wait. You've got to learn to ride the wild horse, as I say. And it's like a wild horse, you know. I spoke to a young lady yesterday as an example, and she said, I was feeling perfectly fine. I went to a doctor, and the doctor told me I had stage 4 cancer, and I'd been upset and sick and confused ever since. I said, you mean somebody who said to you that you were seriously sick changed the course of the way you feel about life? And she said, well, I never thought about it that way. She said, but I'm seriously sick. I said, obviously you believe you're seriously sick, and you're playing out what a seriously sick person acts like. I said, now, let's review what you've just said to me. And this conversation took no more than 5 minutes. I said, now, were you completely happy before the doctor told you you were serious? She said, absolutely, completely happy, completely healthy, I was exercising, etc. I said, okay, now, why did you permit that knowledge to completely put you into a tailspin? And she thought for a minute, and tears came to her eyes. And she said to me, I don't know. I said, because you don't believe that you have the ability to heal yourself. And she cried. If you don't believe that you have the ability to heal yourself, who do you think is going to heal you? A stranger that you pay a lot of money to? That doesn't even make sense. You've got to learn to heal yourself. You've got to learn to have the power. Now, you may need the doctor, you may need the Hippocrates Health Institute to help, to guide you, to support you, to love you, to get you to love and respect and to honor yourself. But at the end of the day, you're the self-healer. If you need a treatment from a physician, the treatment doesn't heal you. The treatment may take the obstacle and make it smaller. Your body heals itself. Think logically. If you've had a big cut where you were bleeding profusely, many of us have in our lives, did it not heal itself? Of course it did. If not, you would have died. So if a big wound can heal itself, what is it your body's incapable of healing? I propose nothing. But it's a state of mind, it's a state of consciousness, and it's a state of understanding that you have the power to to heal. You have the power to heal. Our founder, Anne Wigmore, was told in 1952 she had 90 days to live. The Harvard doctor's words were, "Go home, get your affairs in order. You're going to die in 3 months." She went home and thought about it. It wasn't a very good proposition as far as she was concerned. So she started to employ the tools of nature. Anne Wigmore healed herself. Now, this little lady without even a high school education didn't go and hide after she healed herself. She said, "I've got to teach other people how to do this." And that's how we started. That's how we started. Can you be the same person? You say that you love your family. You say you love your friends. Is that true? Do you love them enough to be an example of the power of the human being, and the power of consciousness, and the power of God? Do you really love them that much? How about yourself? Do you love yourself that much to heal yourself and to see that power that you have? And if not, I ask you why. That's the work that you have to do. That's the work all of us have to do. Always be content with where you are, but be unsettled with where you can go. That's the gift of life, to be relentlessly in search of going further, at the same point being content with what we have. And the truth of the matter is, when I began my work as a young man in my 20s, it was stunning and shocking to me that I would often hear from people that it's great I got sick. To me, it was sort of perplexing and confusing. Not sort of, very perplexing and confusing. I started to think maybe these people have a psychological disorder, because I was not mature enough to understand what they were saying. I wasn't wise enough to understand what they were saying. And after listening, probably by my early 30s, I started to recognize that what they were saying is they needed the toll booth on the road of life. They needed the place that they had to stop driving 90 miles an hour and make a deposit. And in this case, the deposit, when you have a disorder, a sickness, is slowing you down enough to say, I've got to contribute in this. I'm part of this process, driving. Most of us don't even recognize we're not being driven, we're driving. And rational people at that point, when you reach the toll booth and go from 90 miles an hour to nothing and make the deposit, start to drive in a much more intelligent way at that point. And they say at that point, well, maybe I do know what exit I want to get off at. I know how far I want to go. I know how safely I want to live. Are you going to put yourself into that position or not? Are you going to feel hopeless and the world's against you and God made you sick? You know, don't blame God for this. God gave you a free will. What differentiates you from all other creatures is that you have a free will. Don't blame anyone for this, including yourself. What you do is acknowledge that in the past you were not as willing to be as awakened as you currently want to be. And also acknowledge as awakened as you are, you can become more awakened. And what's ironic is we have this idea and philosophy in our cultures globally, as we get older, we're wiser. I don't buy this. The wisest you were is at conception and birth. There was nothing you were incapable of then. Nothing you couldn't do. You could simultaneously learn 50 languages fluently at that point. But then the conditioning started. Mom and dad started. You're the girl, you're the boy, you're small, you're tall, you're black, you're white, you're a Jew, you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're poor, you're rich. And all of that started. Now, the individual family conditioning was the first burden. Then they educated you. And ironically, I used to think most education taught you something. Now I recognize that most education teaches you to conform. Nothing wrong with education, it teaches discipline. But you've got to think beyond the education. There are rare times, I remember certain teachers and professors I had that thought beyond that realm of constant rehashing. that really incited thought and emotion in me that maybe not would have happened without their probing and insistence. But at the other point, education doesn't make you smarter, so they condition you more and more and more. Religion, nothing's wrong with spirituality. Most religion teaches you limitation, not the endless, extraordinary ability that God, if you wish, has. You think, if there's a God, think of what God means in your mind, that he's judging or she's judging, saying to you, this is wrong, this is bad, if you don't join this organization, you're going to burn. Well, I don't buy that. I think you were taught, every theology in the world teaches you, God is love. All things good are love. You are love. Healing is love. Strength is love, not resistance. Strength is not resistance. It's love and acceptance. And if we could just recognize that the world we live in, as my first mentor used to say to me, whatever they tell you, look at the opposite, and that's true. She was right. Whatever they're telling you is right is usually wrong. When I was young, they told me eating meat was an essential thing. If I didn't eat meat, I would actually get weak and die. Wrong. They told me that my bones would crumble if I didn't take milk. Now we know that your bones crumble from taking milk. Wrong. And so the list can go on and on and on, from practical things to philosophical things, etc. You know, work hard, suffer, and you'll be okay. No. Find joy, contribute, and now you'll be happy and well. And we have this concept because most people are so confused and so upset and so sad that if they don't have some kind of fight or resistance that they're going through, they don't feel substance. They don't feel like they have any significance at all. Can you imagine that real significance is in a feather? It's not in a boulder? Can a boulder float in midair? And can the wind pick it up and carry it anywhere? Is mobility and ease power and strength? Or is inflexibility and unbelievable burden strength? I challenge you to think about that. Is a part of your heart and soul and personality that really is powerful the one that is angry, or is it the one that's joyous? I know laughter is much more powerful to me than sadness. How about you? So start to think in a way that maybe you weren't taught to think, that your education and your religion and your culture didn't teach you to think that way. Recognize that it's within our privy, all of our privies, to create the reality that we wish to have. And it may be something that takes time. You know, I know most of us don't go right back to that point when we were conceived to be ultimately as conscious as we possibly can be easily. It's chipping away. I always picture it as taking a beautiful piece of marble and a hammer and a chisel and slowly chipping away until you sculpt a life. You create the privy of the universe that you wish to live in. And it may take time to do that. But do it. That's the message here. Do it. So coming to a point now where I think we're going to talk a little bit more about why many of you may be here on the call with us today, and I hope your friends and your family join us. This is the first of many, many calls. This is not only going to be me that's going to be speaking, and Anna Maria, of course, my wife and the co-director of Hippocrates, but we're going to have our team speak to you. That this is a way we really are passionate about touching people globally. So we want you to bring people that you care for and love into this picture, and slowly but surely maybe they can influence themselves. We don't want to influence anyone. We want them to influence themselves through being touched by the words of truth, to become a member of the army of love that we talked about earlier. And so what we're going to speak about today is what you can do personally in your life to make yourself a healthy and happy and better person. Well, number one, I want you to today, this is your homework for today, to go out to the dollar store, and you may be fortunate, you may have a binding pad there, a notebook there. And I want a very brand new notebook. Either you have one in storage at your home, go out to the dollar store and buy one. This does not have to be an expensive endeavor. And on the front of that notebook, I want you to write something like this. Don't listen to what I say and write it. Hear what I say and feel it. The love book, the me book, the self-esteem book, the charisma book, something of that nature. I want you to write that down on that book today. So by the end of today, and if you're listening to me someplace where it's very late at night or the middle of the night, then at that point tomorrow night, by tomorrow night, but most of you listening by tonight, I want you to have that book. Write something with your own sentiment, your own feeling on the front of that book. And before you go to sleep at night, if you know you go to bed at 10 o'clock as an example, I want you to get into the bathroom, brush your teeth, wash yourself, get your pajamas on or not, and get into bed 5 minutes early. And I want you to write the 7 things that you loved about that day, that you loved about what you did that day. Now, as simple as this seems, most of you are really going to struggle with this. I've been using this myself for 40 years and worked with tens of thousands of people in this process. So again, the me book, the self-esteem book, the love book, whatever you want to call it. And tonight, the latest tomorrow night, 5 minutes before you normally go to sleep, in that book, the 7 things you liked about yourself the most that day. Now, these do not have to be heroic things. You don't have to catch a bullet with your bare hand or a baby jumping out of a building that's on fire with your bare hands. That may happen some point, and congratulations if you participate in that. Let us know. But it could be very simply when you were driving, you saw an elderly person driving in your direction, and rather than startling them and pulling out, you didn't. You opened the door for something. You said kind words rather than not. When you really wanted a candy bar, you took a green salad instead. You may like the way, it may sound shallow, you may like the way you combed your hair that day. It doesn't matter. But be very pure, be very honest, and just write it down. Now, these do not have to be elaborate sentences. I would prefer, frankly, that you write 1 or 2 or 3 words that remind you and provoke you. Now, why I want you to do this just before you go to bed is sort of a way to force self-evaluation. We are literally sitting there and evaluating your day. And I know quite often before I did this, what I would be thinking about is all the things I didn't finish, all the things that worried me, all the problems that I had. This actually changes the channel to the happy channel versus the sad channel over there. So the last thing you're thinking before you go to bed is the positive things about what you did that day. Now, why 7? Listen closely. In 1 week, so today happens to be Thursday, or Friday, excuse me. And by next Thursday night, when you put your head on the pillow, that will be 7 days. 7 times 7 is 49. So in 1 week, in a book, with I, me, I love myself charisma book, you will have literally almost 50 things that you love about yourself. Now, if I talk to any of you, the most optimistic, successful, happy person in the world, I would challenge that most of you couldn't write 50 things down you like about yourself if I forced that issue. Why do I know that? I tried it with hundreds of people. CEOs of corporations, famous movie stars, famous athletes, they would get to 10 and 15 things and then sit there looking at the paper. You, in 1 week, will have 50 things you like about yourself. Now let's further this. In 1 month, so by next month, which in this case is June, by about the 20th of June, you will now have approximately 200 things you like about yourself. That's amazing, isn't it? In 1 year, you will have 2,400 things you like about yourself. Now, I recall when I began this nearly 40 years ago. Before, when people would say negative things to me, or I would hear negative things, it would permeate me. I would internalize them, say, oh, well, that's really horrible. It's somebody feels that way about me. After 1 year, and I had 2,400 things I liked about myself in the book, you could say anything to me, I didn't care. It was unbelievable what this did. And how long does this take? The average person, it takes 2 to 5 minutes a night. Now, if you can't take 2 to 5 minutes to acknowledge your strengths, you should never be on one of these calls again. You should never think of coming to Hippocrates, because we're not interested in people like you. You've got to start taking responsibility. This is a powerful, powerful tool. Just like taking living food, it creates life. Taking positive attitude, it creates strength. And it's the last thing you're doing every night. I'll never forget, I looked back at the books over the years, and at first it was apparently things that I would now perceive as shallow. But as you developed a certain inner strength and understanding that you were a person that was good, you weren't a person who had a problem, you weren't a person who was sad, you weren't a person who was a taker or a greedy person, you were actually a giver and a contributor. As time goes on and the years pass, you're going to see that maybe you can catch a bullet with your bare hand eventually. Maybe you'll be there at the right time when the baby is needing you to catch them. And it doesn't mean that you become a more conscious person or some way a superior person. It just means you become more aware of your strengths. And all of us have these strengths. We have the power to heal. We have the power to love. We have the power to share. We have the power to contribute. What's better than that? You've heard the adage, giving is better than taking. Well, that's the laws of physics, by the way. Contribution is always better than request. And what are you here to contribute? On your tombstone, think about it. And let's hope it's 120 years after you're born. Is it going to say, good guy, good gal? Or is it going to say what you contributed? That's what we're here to do. We're here to contribute. We're here to give. We're here to receive love and to give love. Those of us who understand this are going to be, in the future, the people who change the course of humanity. And again, to finally finish, we have 12% of us in a global family now that are ready to tip in the direction of positive. We need you to join 6% more. And I honestly believe within the next decade or so, we will do this. Thanks for being with us on our inaugural launch. And you're going to hear a lot from all of our team here at Hippocrates. Stay tuned. Bring your friends and family together. God bless each and every one of you. Let life be good.
Oh, can we review the stats real quick?
Yeah. I just have to run to the restroom. I left me.
Okay, so you held about 50 live viewers, and we had 700 page requests in 2 hours.
Oh, that's great.
Really good. So now you're flirting with 1,100 views for the day.
Beautiful. That's good.
Make sure this is...
So it looks like we got off for a good start, right? Yeah.
Okay, so I have that woman Joyce who's got the allergies reading, okay, so